Frank Bruni's column in Sunday's New York Times carried the audacious headline, Biden's best Veep pick is obvious. And Frank Bruni's obvious choice, I'm glad it's easy for him and he thinks it's obvious, his obvious choice for vice president is our next guest tonight, Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois. Frank Bruni wrote, Duckworth, a former Army lieutenant colonel who lost both of her legs during combat duty in Iraq, is a choice that makes exquisite emotional and moral sense. Here is Senator Duckworth on the Senate floor yesterday.
Donald Trump has never understood what words like sacrifice or courage mean. So how dare he let his own personal cowardice, his inability, or even worse, his disinterest in standing up to Vladimir Putin lead to a reality where those Americans who are actually brave enough to put on a uniform and serve are put at greater risk.
Joining our discussion now is Democratic Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois. She's a former Army lieutenant colonel and is now a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Senator Duckworth, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I just want to give you an opening for your reaction for this story as to where it stands tonight. New York Times latest reporting saying they are tracking the money and they've found over $500,000. Looks like Russian money going into Afghanistan for these bounties.
It's incredible that the president so far, his only response to all of this information is to say, I didn't know, nobody told me. In fact, he should be out in front of this saying, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. What we know so far, Lawrence, is that there were intelligence products that said, hey, you know, something is going on. We think this is happening, but they couldn't substantiate. And then later on, we had some detainees that we captured who said, hey, the Russians are paying us to go out and kill Americans. And then the intelligence community found these wires, these financial transactions from a Russian military intelligence, the GRU-controlled banks, to known Taliban middlemen. And then U.S. forces and Afghan security forces went out and did a sweep and going after known Taliban agents and known criminals. They found $500,000. All of this points to the fact that the Russians have been paying folks in Afghanistan, Taliban or other criminal organizations to kill Americans. And all our president can say is, nobody told me about it. It boggles the mind. And I'm putting on my most polite language as opposed to my Army language, which would be something a lot, you couldn't put it on the air, I don't think. But the incompetence is incredible.
Senator, feel free to use Army language here. We'll do what we have to do with it. So what would you do? What should be done in this White House? I mean, just imagine a future in which is possible, in which Joe Biden's president, and if you were there as vice president, what would you advise the president to do when this information was discovered and brought to the president?
Well, the first thing, I mean, I wouldn't even have to advise Joe Biden. He would have done it on his own. The minute that he read that report in the daily presidential brief, which, by the way, we now know that this report was in the daily presidential brief as early as February, the end of February, and this president did not read it, apparently. So we know for sure that Joe Biden would actually read his daily briefs. He would have stepped out already and got in front of this and reached out and to the Russians to say, you cannot do this, you will not do this, and to sanction the Russians and to show them the consequences of putting bounties on American heads. What he would not have done would be to do what Donald Trump has done, which is to say, hey, you know what? The Russians aren't so bad. And by the way, you know, we're just going to go ahead and try to help them rejoin the G7 and do the G8. You know, Trump has been in the Russians' back pocket, and I don't know why, but it is absolutely shameful and downright obscene that the commander-in-chief of the United States military would turn a blind eye to a foreign adversary, putting a bounty on the heads of men and women who put on the uniform of this great nation to defend and to protect us. And we're in harm's way right now while he's out there on the golf course.
Let's listen to more of what Joe Biden said about this today.
If these allegations are true and he did nothing about any of this, then, in fact, I think the public should, unrelated to my running, conclude that this man isn't fit to be president of the United States of America.
Joe Biden also called this a dereliction of duty by Donald Trump. Is that the right way to look at this?
It is very much a dereliction of duty by Donald Trump. And to think, look, Lawrence, there's several things that could have happened here. He was given the briefing and he didn't read it, which is incompetence on his part, a dereliction of duty if you're not doing your job, reading your daily briefing. Number two, he was briefed and he forgot, or he chose not to do something, and he chose to put Russia's interests above the well-being of American troops in harm's way. Or three, the people around him know that he's so incompetent that they're not even going to brief him about it. At which point, you need to fire not just Donald Trump, but the folks who should be bringing him these intelligence reports in the first place. So it's incompetence all around. But you cannot delegate responsibility. It rests with Donald Trump. It rests with the president of the United States. And Donald Trump has failed in his responsibility to the American people and especially to our military men and women. Those brave folks are willing to go out and defend us to their deaths if they may. And it turns out that the president might be turning a blind eye to Russians, helping them get killed.
Senator, let me ask you about the possibility of serving as vice president. If Joe Biden asked you to do that, would you accept that?
Well, I just want Joe Biden in office. If Joe Biden came to me and said, Tammy, the best thing that you can do for this country is to go sweep floors in a VA hospital, I'd go sweep floors in a VA hospital. Our nation right now has such deep wounds that we will have to come together to recover. And no one knows better about pulling our country together, about recovering and fixing and binding the wounds of our nation than Joe Biden does. And so we have a lot of things we have to do. One, we have to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic and get us out of the situation that we're in now with not enough testing, not enough test kits, and an economy that is in a free fall. We have to rescue the economy. We have to, as we're seeing now, go after foreign adversaries who would go after American troops who are in harm's way. There's a lot to be done, and I am on Team Biden 100%. Whatever it is that he asked me to do to help our nation, keep America strong, to make sure that we move our country forward and pull our country back together again, I'm willing to do that.
Senator Tammy Duckworth, thank you very much for bringing both a Senate perspective and a combat veterans perspective to this discussion tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.